Hi, this is JD, the VIP coach, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you today. What an incredible time right now that we're in to be creative, to be resourceful as a leader. You know, if you're listening to this, you are a leader of a high-performing organization or team. You're ready to go to the next level. You want to bring on your A game. But right now, you're asking yourself some important questions. If I've got the right person listening, if you're the person I think you are, you're asking questions like, I can see where I want to go. I can see it. I can taste it. But there's certain things that are in my way that just outlaw me and ambush me from getting there. And that's because things get really, really complicated. And so it's not abnormal that when you grow your organization or your team, as you get new customers, as you start to grow and things begin to get very interesting, what we don't prepare for are all the new details, all the stuff that starts to come in, and then it inadvertently starts to swamp our schedule. And so the entrepreneur, the source of failure for an entrepreneur is the enthusiasm that they lose when they start getting too good at too many other things than the things that give them energy. And so they run out of time. They don't run out of money because they start occupying way too many things, and then they can't get to the most important things that really continue to drive growth and scale the business. So they run out of the landing strip. They kind of become prisoner of their own machine, and they inflict their own betrayal, in a sense. And then they try to change things around, like moving the furniture around in the prison cell, and these things just make matters worse. So today, I'm going to talk about how to defeat that ceiling, that plateau, that progression that we want to make to jump to a whole new level. And the big idea is, how do we grow our businesses while making things simple? And so I don't have the one pill. I don't have the one prescription. There's a lot of components that go into that process. But I think it starts with what I call a fundamental shift in your thinking. Specifically, turning toward things in a certain way. What I call your fundamental orientation needs to shift. And so my hope is that through this time together, as you listen to me in this audio, I'm going to attempt to change your mind in a few ways, to kind of look at things and maybe reframe things differently. So I'm going to talk about 4 fundamental questions. Now, let me give you a little bit of backstory as to how I got to these 4 questions. I've had 22 years in coaching leaders, probably about 33,000, maybe somewhere in the 34,000 session range of one-on-one coaching sessions with leaders. It's all I do. I'm not a motivational speaker. I don't claim to be one. I don't go out and talk to very large events and things. I really made a choice to get in the trenches with CEOs, leaders, business owners, to really do the work and to move point to point from point A to point B. And the one thing that I'm always committed to in coaching a leader is helping them get more effective at creating what they want. How do you become more effective at creating what you want? So, how I got to these 4 questions? Well, I just saw over the years, myself and many leaders, I saw the conditions that they were in and just became a study worm of some of the most difficult conditions that would hold them back. I just became a student of the game of understanding what were the restricting forces. And time again, some of the most restricting forces were sort of the underlying systems, the underlying structures, which are often very, very invisible, that allure business leaders away from being the most effective as they can be and the most efficient that they can be. And where they tend to end up is completely different than their visions. And so why I got involved with them was to kind of plug up this, what I call saying-doing gap between saying I want to be over here, but what I'm doing is over here. And that a lot of times the doing is not aligned with the intention. So when the actions are different than the intention, there's something concerning about that. In that we're doing things, it's like we're getting so busy that we can't do anything to make us any less busy. And when you get to that place, what I call the if factor, incessant freneticness factor, when you get to things where they become so incessantly frenetic, your adrenaline becomes your only source of fuel, and you can't see the forest through the trees because everything is just such a blur. Pretty much you're in the nature of skimming. You're reacting to so many things. You're like a firefighter who's putting out all these fires, but you're becoming an arsonist because you're neglecting a whole bunch of other activities and things you could be doing with your time. And so it creates an unintended consequence, and ultimately it leads to the demise and disappearance of a great entrepreneurial career because they lose their confidence and they lose their enthusiasm when they start mastering the minors, and then they get their kids in the best schools. They put a big roof over their head. They get into all these obligatory chores that they can't stand doing, and their whole attitude and their whole sense of things just goes down the tube. And they stop being creative, and they stop being resourceful, and they stop listening, and they stop putting their heart and their soul into what they're doing. They disengage. They go offline. And a lot of the simplicity turns into interference, and a lot of the confidence they had at the beginning turns into doubt. And when you have interference and you're at this war on stuff, you feel very isolated because you don't know who to talk to about it. It feels very powerless and very helpless. It's not a fun way of existing, and it's certainly not the dream that most of the entrepreneurs had in mind or the business leaders had in mind in their careers when they started. So they are on this path, this sort of arc, where this inevitable sort of riptide takes them down these rapids, and that they cannot seem to get out of it. It's almost like a death spiral or a snowball that's just got you perpetuatingly going down and down like an avalanche that you can't get any traction with. And so the internal impact can be very damaging, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. And the external impact of a person's life can be so hectic and full of commitments and things that literally it wears their health down. And I'm always thinking, can I get to an entrepreneur leader soon enough before they hit these kind of conditions? Because it's, again, growth has built-in limits. There is a limit to growth. It's an archetypal pattern. When there is a growing action in any system, businesses grow, we get new customers, we have new capabilities. So how do we navigate these waters? How do we move from a state of being in this sort of reactive state, this incessantly frenetic state, to more of a creative state? And that's why I wanted to come into these 4 questions, because to me, what these 4 questions do is they start you on a different fundamental path where you can continuously liberate yourself internally and externally, and you can move some of this interference back into creative freedom. You can transform some of what was lost. You can't get to all your relationships, and now you need to be able to get back to, or at least the idea of getting back to some of the relationships that you now are freed up to do. It's about building a great team, a unified team around you. Just remember that the team that you have around you is going to make or break your career. If you want to know how you're doing, if you want to know how your team is, ask your children. Your children are the greatest measure of how you're doing when you're outside work. And what you're doing outside work tells you what kind of team you have. If you're present with your children and they enjoy the time with you, you have support. If you don't, you're going to be on screens all the time. They'll tell you, right? They're not going to feel like you're present with them. So I love that idea, that phone call from a spouse or from the kids that says, Coach JD, thanks so much for bringing them back. Thanks so much for delivering them back into my personal life. Because we become so busy that we just can't think or plan. And then we get stuck in our personal life, and there's so much tension there between all the things that we thought we would get at the beginning to be free and to have our own time and all that, and it just turns into something sour, something different. Now, get my drift here. I'm not saying that when you jump into an entrepreneurial career, it's pessimistic and that you're inevitably going to go down these rapids and you're going to tumble into this hell. All I'm saying is that we need to be very mindful of the natural order of things when you're in a system of growth. And if you don't plan for it, if you're not scaled for it, if you're not operating in the right habits, the mental habits and the methods, it's easy to fall into this interference and this place where you don't want to be. So in a way, it's about elimination. It's about addition by subtraction. And so we have to start kind of from the beginning, these 4 questions. And so I call them fundamental questions because they are the underlying foundation, the place from which you organize your decisions, your actions, and all of your communications. I can't think of 4 questions that would shape who you are as a leader more. These are really going to tell the tale. And so each one of them is designed to be a principle. It's designed to be a conviction that you hold steady to. And you'll hear them in the question. You'll hear the suggestion, the posture, the disposition that I'm describing by the questions. So I'd like to get started on question number 1. Question number 1 is, will you choose to be the predominant creative force in your life? Will you choose to be the predominant creative force in your life? Listen to the question. Will you choose to be the predominant creative force in your life? I can't think of a leader who doesn't answer the call of this question. Leadership is a process of changing or improving something. Leadership is a stance. It's a choice. It's a way of which we're operating on behalf of something that matters to us that we choose to bring into the world. And the quality of expression that we're able to access at any moment by doing that is amazing. And leadership, it's a orientation. It's a creative orientation, not a reactive one. So, if we're operating according to our circumstances and we're trying to leverage our attitude in response to our circumstances, that doesn't mean you're creating what you want. It just means you're changing your attitude. And in our society, over the last 40 years or so, we've gotten so fixed on our identity, on who we are and how to respond better to the environment, how to respond better to circumstances. Our positive thinking has just gotten out of hand. And it obscures the ability for us to really tell the truth fluently to ourselves. Leaders must have visibility. We do not have a creative process without visibility. If we don't know where we are, how can we get where we're going? Think about it. If I'm flying to New York, I think I'm in Chicago, but I'm actually in Los Angeles, I'm going to run out of fuel. I don't have the resources for that. But we don't like to tell the truth. It's not human nature to tell ourselves the truth, because we may not like what we hear, and we may have to change something as a result. Oh boy, watch out. But we learn as leaders to strengthen this intestinal fortitude, to live into the present moment, to be where we are, to be fluent in current reality, to be accurate in our perceptions at all times, to see from different sides of the system, to see from what we can see, to see from the way others see who report to us and help us see things as they are, to see the playing field as leaders, to be able to see things that are ready to take off, things that are ready to emerge, opportunities, to get signs and signals of a potential future concept or idea and bring it full force into being, to be able to step into a change process, sense what wants to emerge, sense what's needed of us in our deepest convictions and values, and act from that place. This is an orientation of the creative. So if someone asks you what's important to you, you just say, this is what's important to me. See, what's important to us is not a designed should. It's not a rule. It should be important that I X. It's what does matter, not what should matter. We begin from a place of listening to things that matter to us, listening to qualities that are needed of us, and stepping into those with choices that we make, being intentional. So the game of leadership is about positioning yourself to get better at creating what you're after. But to be the predominant creative force in your life, you have to have two things. One, you have to have a sense of where you're going. What do you want to create? What do you want to bring into being? That doesn't start with your current situation. Most creations come from separate places. They don't come from what you know. You create and you learn how to create while you create. It's not a process of predicting. It's a process of creating. You're not a weather person. You're not predicting the future. You're creating one. How do I learn how to create a restaurant I love in my vision? I create a restaurant. How do I learn to create a career in accounting? I start accounting for business people. Right? But we stand back. We get ready to mask our fear. So we prepare ourselves for the worst. We think about all the possibilities that could go wrong, and we need to manage those risks. Or we go try to find the right answers. Someone's already figured it out. Why reinvent the wheel? Only to find that those existing frameworks are not really fit for our goal. It's very complex. So then we drift into someone else's goals. Maybe we'll try on that future. But then we know that that's not authentic and it's not true to ourselves. Doing something over and over again that doesn't matter, I think, is the definition of a wasted life. That is an unlived life. To do things in your life that do not matter to you, what's the point? Why bother with things that don't matter? right? I mean, sure, there's things that you need to do that are necessary. You've got to file your taxes. You've got to comply with certain things in society. I get that. You got to have a driver's license. You got to have citizenship to be in the country you are. Okay, all that, right? Those are things that we do. Those are ordinary. But leadership is about being extraordinary. It's about excellence. It's about what you do in the next 5 minutes. So what organizes your choices in the next 5 minutes? What matters to you? See, but the other part of creating is this honesty about where you are in relationship to where you want to be. Having an intention, having a goal is one thing. Knowing what matters to you is one thing. You can conceptualize what that is. You can compare and contrast all the possibilities. You can set up in your mind all the different windows dressings and possibilities of futures, and then eliminate one by one the ones that do not matter, and then keep the ones that do, sure. And what matters now may not matter in the future, and what mattered in the past may not matter now. You will change your mind. The point is you're considering what does matter to you. It begins there. So what matters to you? What matters to you in your life right now? Who matters to you in your life right now? You can't think about why. It's a creative act. You want what you want. That's not what you need. It's what you want. It's okay to want what you want. You're being true to yourself. That doesn't mean you'll always get it either. But being a wanter and wanting what you want is being true to you. And that's a fundamental choice. I want to be a soprano singer, but I'm a baritone. I'm not sure I'll ever be a soprano singer. I'm biologically not made to be one, but I want to be. And so it's not that I'm suffering because I can't have it. I'm not wanting to be a soprano singer because I have a problem to solve. I'm not wanting to be a soprano singer because it defines me as a person. I'm not wanting to be a soprano singer because I'm miserable without contentment, and I'm going to find it in the future. I'm just creating it because it matters. The best creations come for their own sake, because we create things that we love. Creating starts with love. But to see things as they are compared to where we want them to be, to have that accuracy, to be able to offer ourselves an understanding of the patterns and structures that we're in, that foster us and that limit us, we have to be able to see things with the eyes of learning. Not performing, not getting it right the first time, but having plenty of second chances. Because creating is learning. It is. It's like ready, fire, aim. We learn by doing. There's nothing better than learning by doing. You have to do something to learn. You won't learn to swim unless you get in the pool. You don't learn by sitting by the pool. You jump into the pool. So it starts with a choice. I want to learn how to swim. I want to get to a place of seeing myself swim at a certain level. It's no different than sailboarding. I'm getting back up on the board. Every time I fall down, I'm getting back up. Why do I learn? Because the vision matters. Why do I go through the difficulty? Because there's a foolish stage that is always inherent in the creative process. It's a constraint gene that comes with the territory. It will be easier as we go. Look at the career arc of professionals. As they get better and better and more skillful, they don't need determination later on. They're just good at what they do. So we get good at what we do by reporting the truth to ourselves. If you want to see an example of this, just watch the post-talk of a tennis match. Watch a professional and watch how they talk about how they played the match. It almost seems like there's two people out there. There's the observer and the player knows when they're on and when they're off and how they're playing the game and what they did and why the other player was better than them. They're very factual in their fluency checks with where they are at any moment. You have to be. If you're not objective, you don't learn. Because unless you see what's going on, how do you really learn or adjust something in your game? Hence, how do you get better at something until you confess to yourself where you are? And this is a skill, is to be committed to tell the truth to yourself and learn from other key sources of data in the system you're in. It's a feedback process, right? So it's a balancing system. By having the feedback processes that are set up in the current state, we can contrast that to the desired state, and guess what that does? It establishes tension between the 2 points. So like an archer, you have these distances in the bow. You pull it, and the more you stretch the bow, the more propulsion you give the arrow, and the more precision the arrow has to reach the target, the more distance. It's not that you have more power, it's that there's more energy to work with when there's more distance, right? It's like the flames between the logs on the fire burn higher the more the distant they are. Think about it. But what must we do? Because as humans, we often get caught in our concepts. Well, what's a concept? Our concepts are our beliefs, our assumptions. Our concepts are the habituated judgments that we hold. Our concepts about who we think we are. Negative beliefs about who we are, and positive beliefs. We have thoughts about the way we think other people are thinking. We have thoughts that are worldviews about the way the world is. We have thoughts about the way we should be in certain situations. We have expectations of the way things are supposed to play out. We have all sorts of thoughts. So thoughts are always with us. However, in order to create, in order to position what I'm talking about, taking a creative orientation, we must disassociate from our concepts. And what does that mean? Well, it means that we're very aware of the constructs that are in our thoughts. What we assume, what we make up to be real. We can edit our reality. We can edit ourselves. We can edit things rather than see things as news, as factual. So we kind of inflict betrayal of ourselves with our own story. This is called self-deception. So imagine that you're a stick figure walking down a street, and other humans are walking past you, and there's a little thought bubble above each person's head. This is who I am, this is how it is, and this is what other people think. This is who I am, this is how it is, and this is what other people think. And can you imagine, as you look as if you're hovering over the scenario, can you imagine the coordinations of language and behavior that happen with this private thought bubble that's inwardly dialoguing with each human system? Imagine how that combination plays out. Right? So the person leaps immediately to their judgment. Oh, that person looks like a jerk, a jackass. Therefore, I should. Oh, I'm a person who's inadequate and no one loves me. Therefore, I should. Oh, I believe the world is a bad place and that I can't trust the universe. Now, bad things happen. You better be careful. There's bad people out there. Therefore, I should. Therefore, I should. So our mental models, in a way, without regulating it with our awareness, just construct automatic action. What we can do as leaders is to put that in the bleachers. We can hold space in a way where we practice the principle of separation, which is we are dislocated from trusting or abiding by or being governed by our existing models of thought, our existing frameworks, what I call downloading, and rather than subscribe to that theater, to those theories, which means theater, we can occupy a place where we see current reality just as it is, just as it is. Now, why should we do this? It's not just for the sake of seeing reality, because, it's not about being a realist and making everything real and trying to justify it and so forth. It's just being able to move point to point from where you are to where you want to be. The only purpose of really seeing where you are is where you are in relationship to where you want to be. Right? Just seeing where you are for the sake of it, good, make it a hobby. But seeing where you are compared to what matters to you to create. Seeing where your team is, seeing where your organization is, seeing where your customer is, seeing wherever you are in relationship to creating an outcome, a goal. But you have to have an outcome to do that. Because once you start to create a future, when Kennedy said, let's put a man on the moon, do you think automatically a lot of current reality was unearthed? Absolutely. We said, I don't know how to do that. That's big. That's impractical. That's impossible. Sure, some of our creations or dreams, our visions, they're not practical. As a matter of fact, a lot of creations that are built as art, that are created as art, the artist starts with a vision of the future that they seek to create. It's not about what's attainable. It's just a vision. It does something to you. And the fluency with it is it matters. It's generating the love to create it. Think about a musician. Think about why Bono and Edge riff and write music together. They co-create music together. In fact, the whole group, U2, I'm sure, has sessions where they're just focusing on creating, bringing music that is invisible into visible. It doesn't exist, but they're bringing it into being through the creative process. They come to a place where they go and create it. And so the place doesn't create it. It's part of it, but they're creating. And so they're creating by moving the music into being, by experiencing it, by writing it, by cultivating it, by setting up key practices. It's like scratching a lottery ticket. They're just setting up a creative act. So they do. And they live in a creative orientation. Do they live by what they think the market will buy? I don't think so. I think the best creations come by being true to creating things that authentically matter. And then they have market value. As a matter of fact, the distinct market value comes from how authentic it actually is. Because if we were copycats, there'd be no geniuses in the world. We would just be like everybody else, trying to do what already works to mask the fear of failure. Creating starts with love. Creating starts with being true to what we see. Imagine, conceptualize. It's not finding it. It's not it in shining armor where we discover it, where we just discover that something's out there and we stumble upon it and all that. Those things can happen. Those are improvisations. But most of it comes from conceiving of, conceptualizing of something that does matter that we choose to bring into the world. Right? I want to create children. Therefore, I start making them. I don't know how to be a dad, but I learn how to be a dad through the creative act of making kids. I love those kids before they came in the world. Therefore, I'm organizing my behavior around that loving idea. It does something to me in the way I'm trying out new ways of doing it. Things work, things don't work. So to do that, we have to take our identity out of the process. That's right. It's not about you. See, the news is that whatever you think of yourself is not relevant to creating anything. And yet we have this raving hunger to work on ourselves because someone else in advertising or someone by comparison has in some way told us to. And so we follow these socialized expectations that if I do it, I will be better. So we go to school, we try to learn something, we try to be less adequate, we try to be equipped. Who says so? I'm not saying be a rebel. I'm not saying that education isn't important. But when it's staged or postured as if we don't have it, then we will be less fortunate, that is a premise that I don't think we need to live by. Education is for the purpose of learning, and learning is done by creating something. And so the usefulness of information and learning resources is based on what we're creating. And that's why I see so many students going to school with just the underlying structure of doing something because someone told them to, rather than creating something that matters. See, and I think in this economy that we're in, it is about following our gifts. Our gifts are things that matter to us. What we see is what we're gifted at, because we see things that activate us in the world. We see things conceptually, or we see actualities in the context of our work or our world, and then we activate or animate ourselves based on what has heart and meaning that we assign to those contexts. We have events that activate us. The context of those events activate us. And so those events start to see a path where we can contemplate out of those events how that connected with who we are. You know, maybe it's a sorrowful news story about suicide, and there's some cause to begin saving lives, or maybe it's an opportunity, and these things can come at any time. So we may stumble upon it, but the idea of intention, creating, is I choose to be a predominant creative force in my life. So my orientation to current reality is an acquired taste, and it's a great taste that I would acquire because all it is being my teacher. I'm learning by seeing current reality as I go. But I've got to use failure as assets. See, I'm going to make mistakes. That's what the learning process is littered with. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to eat failure flakes for breakfast. It's a 50-50 relationship. Half the time what I do is going to work. Half the time it's not going to work. But I'm going to treat those two outcomes with equal value. I'm either going to learn or I'm going to win. And as I go along, I'm going to have to hold space. I'm going to have to hold periods of time where something emotionally in me really wants things to go fast and speed up and get to the end of the book. But the other part of me maturely says, stay with where things are and be fluent in where things are. Because if I press things on so hard, I may be overstepping the capacity that the current creation is ready for. It's like tilling soil. You have to till the soil for you to plant so things can be ready. You have to put the heart in the body if it's a transplant when the body is ready. I have to listen to what the body is ready for in order for me to combine the heart with it. So I have to learn by seeing current reality more clearly, fluently, We can do this individually. We can do this as a group, as an organization, to co-create outcomes. But we have to take our identity out of the process. So that means seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we can see facts, point to point, about where our baseline is, where we start from. And in that way, we equip ourselves with the right resources. Because if I don't understand where I really am, let's say I'm in a 40-foot hole. Why would I ask someone for a 10-foot rope if I'm in a 40-foot hole, you see? So by being clear about what is really going on compared to where I want to be, it equips me with the resourceful thinking. And it's not about solving problems. It's about maybe setting the problem on the table, looking at the current puzzle. But it's not about removing or eliminating the unwanted thing. It's about creating and generating architecture, not demolition. So our sense-making about where we are, our capacity to see cause and effect relationships, to see the system's view of life by living in the structures we are, where we know that we are in a constant, eternal truth of interdependence, that we are not who we are without other people influencing us. People are people because of other people. The way you treat someone is the way you see them, and the way you treat them is who they become. Come on. The properties that come out in ourselves are based on the patterns of interaction between us and others, us and things. We live in a world of interdependence. Our lives are governed by underlying structures that we're in. We have different urges that are in conflict with each other. We have goals that are in conflict with each other. I want to diet, therefore I get thin. I act, I diet, but I get hungry at the same time. I'm going to reduce that hunger by eating more. Therefore, I want to go on a diet. You hear the yo-yo effect. So we are in a place where oftentimes the systems that we're in, we do not see. And yet we see the effects of these systems. And so by living as a predominant creative force in our life, we're able to make better sense of things as we go along. Hence, you're going to create universes and then live in them. You're going to create patterns in your life that either serve or take you away from your goal. So one of the most powerful principles is the principle of structural tension that I just talked about with the archer. Is positioning in your life this balancing system between the current state and the desired state, and that you originate your goals based on this, and that you organize yourself, your courses of action, to create your goals with this in mind. Is that every action is a guess, and that you do not know if an action works until you create something. Once it does, then you keep it. If it doesn't work, change it. The point is, creating and problem solving are different, and the reason why is that creating always invites new responses. The problem solving does not, because you'll take action to eliminate an existing problem. The problem then goes away. The original actions to solve the problem also go away, which then create a repeat effect. It creates more and more of the same in repeating, because again, it's not a structure that can support lasting accomplishment, while structural tension can, because you move toward the act, you act upon a creation, you act in accordance with the outcome. As you bring it into being a little more, you ask yourself, how am I doing in getting what I'm after? And then you act on what you know, and then that information serves you. Rather than being in my identity and it defining me as a person, it doesn't. It's what I have. It's not what I am. So I have these habits. I am not these habits. I have these emotions. I am not these emotions. I have this car. I am not my car. I have these clothes. I am not my clothes. I have these mental constructs. I am not these mental constructs. The point is, you're not defined by anything other than your soul. Your soul is your soul. You are a soulful person having a human experience, enjoying a creative process, a learning process in life of unexpected things that you did not expect along the way, current reality, in combination with doing a few things that have heart and meaning that you choose to focus or organize your life towards. Creating a career, creating a marriage, creating kids, creating a hobby, creating a poem, creating. Whatever the subject matter is, the underlying structure will pretty much determine the behavior. It is the most causal force, more than your personality, more than anything, your gender, all that. What about your beliefs? You don't need them. The belief business is different than the creating business. You don't need your beliefs to create anything. Beliefs are beliefs, positive beliefs, negative beliefs, but we tend to leave them in. We tend to include them because we think we need to change something in the existing structure. So we don't love ourselves. So we write love notes to ourselves to bring ourselves up to deserve love. Let me tell you something about deserving. Deserving and desiring are not the same. You don't need to deserve what you desire. You don't need to work on yourself in order for you to get better at creating what you want. Certainly if something is directly in the way, that may be worth taking some action on behalf of the outcome. But there's nothing to work on about you. There's nothing wrong with you. Creating something is about getting better at creating it. Learning how to paint and create paintings starts by painting and getting where your paintings are compared to the kind of paintings you're after. And then learning as you're going along by getting good feedback sources, yours and others, teachers, so you can begin to move in a new way towards the capacities in the creations that you want. Learning how to play piano, you don't need to see a shrink. See, the point is when you're creating, you're not taking a psychological view of the game. You don't need to. You start creating by doing it. It's not about improving yourself. That's an act of violence. You don't need to do that. That's for the birds. As a matter of fact, the more you're focused on you, and the more you focus on where your deficits are and things that are going wrong with you, the lousier creator you will be. Because when you're focused on the creations, you're more effective. When you're parenting, you're more focused on your kids and what they need and where they're going and your highest hopes for them and the relationship you want to create with them. That's the underlying force. That's the structure from which you act. Those are your cues. So the first question of the fundamental questions is, I choose to be a predominant creative force in my life. It's saying I'm not going to organize my life around elimination. I'm going to create aspirations, longings, loves, outcomes in my life that matter to me and invest my life spirit in that direction. Do you need permission? No, it's not a privilege. It's not. It's just a choice. It's not a big deal to get up and create a poem. It's not a big deal to want to create a song. It's not a big deal to write a book. It's not a big deal to choose. Choosing is just simple. Something matters. Create or not create. You either desire or not desire, decide or not decide. Desire and decide are not the same. You desire it and then you go to the decide point. Create or not create. You can choose how you want to organize your life. I'm not telling you how you should. I'm saying that if you choose to be the predominant creative force in your life, you will be involved in your life. And I don't think people want to be any less involved. I think it's not a 4-hour work week. They will do it all day long if they do what they love to do and do what they want to create. It's not about how difficult it is or how easy it is. It's not about how effortless it is. Some things will require more resources and effort. Other things won't. But we don't determine our creative acts based on the standard of difficulty that things have. Creating is creating. Whether it matters or not is what it's about. So just because it's hard doesn't mean you should go compromise. So again, we don't need to manipulate ourselves because of a conflict that we create with reality and say, I don't want this, it's a conflict, so I need to do something. We don't need to fix ourselves. You don't. Make it a hobby. Make self-improvement a hobby. You don't need to be looking at yourself all the time. What's the point? You don't need to figure out who you are. You don't need to answer all the existential questions. Leave those to the existential mysteries. Let the mysteries be mysteries. They'll come as they go. Focus on creating some things that matter to you. Do it right now. You can create something that matters to you tonight. Create a meal that matters to you. Create a pie that matters to you. Right? Right now, take out a blank sheet of paper. Empty all the contents of your purse or your wallet. Now, right now, create something with those contents. Imagine it. Put it together. Look at the current reality while you're acting on it. Bring the end result into being. And then complete on it and accept that creation into your life. Bingo. It's simple. It's so simple, it's hard. We make up all this catharsis about it, about earning it, deserving it, creating it, being clear enough to get it, imagining, being on the right frequency, attracting it, being in the right place at the right time. Okay, you don't have to do all the work. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but you don't need to work on yourself. That's not a prerequisite. It's not required in getting great at anything. If you look at the careers of most people, they didn't come by themselves with high self-esteem. They weren't really confident in themselves. They started where they were. They began creating by doing it, by observing it, getting better as they went, tweaking the game, making those strategic choices, taking their identity out of it. going the distance, being in practice with it, doing it again, raising their game on it, looking at where they are. That's what creating is about. So the next question, I'm going to move on now, is question number 2. Fundamental question number 2 is this: I am 100% responsible for my own security? Do I choose to be 100% responsible for my own security? Well, what is it to be 100% responsible for my own security? Well, that would suggest that there is perhaps a form of security. So I need to be clear that I don't think there's any cure for uncertainty. In my eyes, you're walking and you're knowing the path by walking it. The train is laying the tracks down while it's moving. You know, in your life, when you're observing current reality and you're being fluent in what's going on, you're noticing what's going on as you go. And so you're going to bump into mystery the whole time. You're walking a mystery plan with practical feet. The reality of your existence is that you are in the moment. Whether you think you should be in a future, whether you're trying to avoid the past, whether it's about what you think about you, those are all distractions. It's about being present to the originality of your experience, to see with fresh eyes what you have. And that means you have to make room for mystery in yourself. That means there's a stranger in your wife or husband. You haven't met them yet. There's a stranger, there's a parenthesis after your intentions that is blank. You will fill it in by the time you get there. So trying to know before you know is crazy. It's not something you can occupy. You can't get your head around it. You can try to make probabilities and predictions, but you can, and you may have some idea of your probabilities that you will win or you will lose. But to spend your time on those scenarios so much, focus on the intention and creating it, and then you'll get it by learning. You'll bump into sort of accidents along the way. You will have improvisations. You will try new things because you're coming up with new responses. So if you're creating your own security, you're creating your own financial security. You're creating your own emotional security. You're creating a sense of security. You're creating your own confidence. Confidence is about where you can put your attention. So if you allay your attention on the present moment, your honesty check with yourself is that you're not in the future, you're not in the past, you're not in who you think you are, and you're not in what other people think. You're in the nowness, this present moment, and that you're taking responsibility for your own security means that you choose to be responsible for yourself. That means that your earnings, your financial wealth and security, is your responsibility. It's not given to you. It's something you go out and appoint yourself to create. And you do that in a marketplace. So if you're selling, which you do for a living if you're an entrepreneur, you're the salesperson. You will always sell, and if you stop selling, that'll be the biggest business problem you'll have, is that you will have money issues. Selling is the one thing that's taken from you when things get complicated. Selling is the one thing you've got to keep from here to $10 million in sales as a company. You got to spend 70% of your time on it. If you walk off the reservation of that, then you're jeopardizing your own security. Does that mean that you are in control of it all? No. It just means that you're taking personal responsibility for being a resource in a marketplace that's going to be rewarded for what you give. And taking responsibility for your own security means no entitlements. The rights have no meaning in an entrepreneurial marketplace. So if you're a manager, if you're a leader, even if you make salary, even if you get paid a paycheck, you're not depending on the false sense of security because anybody can come in and say, I don't want you here anymore. You're like a pawn, if that's what you're doing, is that someone's the chess master and they're going to move you around. You are the chess master. You get to choose. So by taking responsibility for your own security, it means you're living as an economic adult. You're not depending on the lifeguard in the tower to take care of you. If you have a boss, their responsibility is not to be your security. They're not there to be your caretaker or make sure everything's okay. They're there to confront your own freedom. Your freedom to choose what you want, what you envision, what you want to be a part of, because that's your human ability. That is your ability to be the predominant creative force in your life. And so being responsible for your own security is based on being a resource for the world and listening in such a way where you can continue to produce products and services and resources that are so valuable that you're acting on behalf of your own security. Now, for me, I've never been employed. I'm not employable. I've made that clear to myself. I've never learned how to be an employee. I don't know what it's like to be employed. But the one thing that seems clear about this distinction between the employee and the player, I'm going to call it the player, is the employee is leaning on someone else for their own answers. What do you think of me? What can I do? What do you think I'm good at? Give me my job description. Give me an assignment. Tell me what success looks like. Whereas the player, the economic adult, says, what can I bring? What can I give? How can I create value? Different questions, different orientation. What do I want to create? What would serve? What is needed here? So the action is not based on the obliteration of fear. It's not based on controlling the fear. Now, someone might say, but what do I do? I'm afraid. I'm afraid that I'm responsible here. I've got to support a family. That's right. I think it was Yogi Berra that said that the moment that he had a family and his kids were depending on him, he broke records. Because you're doing it for someone else. There's something about people that depend on you that brings you innovation. Because the best innovation is when you have no alternative. When there's no safety net. When you're in the middle of the battle. When you're in the game and you have no sense of security. That's when you get really busy. Because you're all in. You will never know your potential until you jump in with that level of fearlessness. It's not that you don't have fear. It's that you are able to be afraid. Even if you're peeing your pants, you have the courage to do what it takes. Because you know that you need to act on the outcome. You organize yourself around outcomes that you choose to create. There are no guarantees. Even if you think you have a solution to one, look again. Really, at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're taking responsibility for being valuable to someone else by being more of yourself. And if you have to sell out to a role, or you have to be so outside your soul to go get it, what are you doing? The world doesn't need that. It needs you to be true to you. We need to depend on people for absolutely committing themselves to their own talents. And your earning power as an entrepreneur is an unlimited asset. More than any stock, more than any property, you have unlimited earning power, and you must not forget that you have that. There's no ceiling. You are in the opportunity economy. You are not in the time and effort economy. Right? Even if you make a paycheck, you must take some risks. So you have to give up 3 things to go to that. To be able to be this responsible economic adult for your own security, you have to give up your status, you have to give up your security, and you have to give up your comfort. You have to pay that at the toll booth to go to the next level. You have to be comfortable with your own ignorance. You have to be a learner with a lab mentality. And that means taking risks, right risks. But if you think you can have opportunity by not taking risks, it doesn't work that way. You can't manage risks and expect opportunity. You will lose one in the other. If you free up risks, you'll have more opportunity. If you want more opportunity, but you want to manage risks, those two are, you're mixing water and oil. They don't go together. And again, you learn or you win. And so as you learn how to go out in the marketplace, and you go to this school. You go to this school of transactions. And every time you go out and get a check, someone pays you, and they give you experience. But when you don't get a check, you also learn. You can't get that in a traditional school system, in the academic world. You don't get the school of transactions. You're not a business street fighter. But when you go out and create businesses, when you go out and put your gifts out there, when you put yourself on the line, and you commit yourself, you take aim with your gifts, opportunities come abound. You walk on the wings of your preparation when opportunity meets you. That's being lucky, is when luck meets opportunity. You're prepared. You're prepared by getting ready for those moments. Because unless you take those risks, you won't grow personally. If you're making $175,000, $200,000, $250,000 on salary, put 25% of that at risk. Go to your company. Talk about, here's what I would like to do. Let me put 25% of that at risk for going to the next level, producing the next opportunity. That way you grow. And in that way, the risks will attract the invisible forces. How do we attract those unforeseen forces that come to our aim? By taking risks, swimming to the ship instead of waiting for it to come in, taking initiative, doing things that get it for us, because people love to see us acting on behalf of something that we're really going for. We root for courageous people. We root for them. We attract support when we do that. We naturally attract people that want to be part of something when we're going for it, when we're taking those kind of risks. And we've never felt more alive and more hungry and more spirited than when we're creating something that we do not know how to do, and we're putting it all on the line. And it's amazing how many beautiful, mysterious moments tend to line up because of it. And those that stay safe and that find that tolerable area of conflict, they never, ever bear witness to those kind of forces because they're not in it, right? There's no other innovation in the world than no alternative. When you don't have an alternative, when you don't have a safety net, it's amazing how attractive you become. And your ability to solve problems and learn them is like warp speed because you have to. Think of it like a tiger hunting for your young. You wouldn't come back and say, I didn't get any food. You eat what you kill. There is no alternative. The best fighting innovation, the best way that tiger can pounce and do what that tiger has to do is because there's no alternative. So what are you setting up? What kind of risks are you taking strategically? What kind of habits do you have, thinking habits and methods that will bring that kind of security? How are you set up? Are you spending your time on the right things that foster that kind of security? To be an economic adult, are you hanging out with the right people who think this way? Why is it that only 5%, 10% maybe of people on earth have this orientation, and they're the ones that tend to have more of the wealth, the majority of the wealth? Because they live in this orientation of taking responsibility for their own security. They have a no entitlement attitude. So they're actually depending on themselves for the opportunities that they have. And they do that by going out and creating value for someone. And I call this a questing disposition, where you're solving problems with your innate capacity to reflect and try new responses. And it's a little bit like you're the climber with the ice pick. When you're learning how to climb up the ice, you throw your pick. If it doesn't work, you throw it again. And then you throw it again, and you throw it again. And you don't give up. And so by the time you throw it again, you actually resolve the tension between where you could and where you couldn't climb by getting to the next step of leverage. But you didn't stop throwing your pick. Even if in golf you took a shot from the rough, you took the shot because you played through. Timing is better than perfect. It's not about being ready to get 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 ready. It's your procrastination and your perfectionism have no place here. There's no guarantee. And when you understand that, then you activate those resources in yourself to go create the security, to create the ongoing adaptations, the ability, because at the end of the day, the only thing I could say about security is your adaptability. There's only one thing that will make you secure, and that's learn and listen. If you're learning, listening, and attending, then you will adapt and bring creative adaptations to what you see. When you're in a creative process, you must. You have to soak things in. You have to be able to see what's going on, to be personally responsible for yourself and take responsibility. And we need that kind of responsibility because that's where the greatest innovations will come to help our population's needs to solve some of the most important problems that we're having economically, ecologically, spiritually. They're all interdependent. So in order to do that, we need to be able to see. We need to be able to innovate. We need to have personally responsible orientations who want to jump in, build organizations, create teams, offer great things, services, products, solutions to the marketplace where people can get helpful help because of our personal responsibility. So we're not taking things, we're go-givers rather than go-getters. It's what we offer that creates opportunity for us, not what we take. It's not about the scarcity mentality. Rather, it's about a mentality of abundance, of seeing that there's plenty to go around and that there are plenty of opportunities that come. So when you're taking personal responsibility and you're getting really good at something, you relax on a free day or on a weekend because you know that there's something you're doing that's very good. Your aptitudes are very high. You can count on a bigger future than the past, optimistically, because you know that you're on the path, you're in the process. So taking personal responsibility means also taking the hits. And it means that when you take a hit, you get the gift. It means that there's going to be moments of despair. There's going to be moments of difficulty. It's those moments too, but you're willing to pay the sacrifices because you have a goal, you have a vision, and that vision matters to you, and you're not lowering it. And it's that ability for you to hang on with all you've got, even if it's on your last fingernail, where things will come through. It's not about believing everything's going to be okay. It's about showing up. It's about being where you are, and it's about knowing the path by walking, and that you walk it with alacrity. You walk it with alacrity, which is willingness. You walk it with will, which is intention. You walk it with an open mind, an open heart, an open will, and that you take in the world just as it is. And you take in the world with a life spirit that is geared towards investing in things because they matter, because at the end of your life, you're not going to be saying, I regretted, I skipped it, I didn't do it, I gave up the dream, I didn't be true to myself. I sat across from my 89-year-old grandmother who told me she still had work to do. She had 2 weeks to live. I said, I will never be that being sitting across from me because I want to create things that I long for, that I have aspirations to do. Because that's the purpose of life, is to live it. And live it is to create things that we're happy creating because we're involved, we're immersed. Our hunger is to be involved in life. To be involved at a level at which our resources and our relationships and our ability to learn is always experiencing time by seeing new things and learning how to create things that we love. It makes time slow down. When it's fast, when we get older and time's going quicker, it's because we've been there, we've done that, we've seen it all. It's because we're not interrupting the pattern. We've hit a plateau, we've gotten old. The secret to youth is creating. It's our birthright to create, to express things we love and create them, to take responsibility for their own sake because they matter. Create great buildings, great organizations, relationships, communities, civilizations, technology, innovations, because we love it, because we care. And because we do, we commit to the excellence, and the excellence is what brings the consistency, and the consistency is what breeds trust, and trust is what breeds relationship. And relationship is what gives us security in the value that we create for someone else.